Hello dear fellows, I'm Evil Punk. This is Forza Motorsport on the Xbox Series X. This is a video pulled straight from one of my streams. It was a touring car race on Suzuka in one of the featured online hoppers. This is a 7-lap race on the full circuit, and this is just another one of those things that I'm super glad I caught in my stream. While it wasn't a particularly successful race, this race was a ton of fun. The touring cars are themselves a lot of fun. In the previous Forza games I didn't enjoy them that much, but the way that the handling and the physics are improved in Forza Motorsport this year in this most recent release, I think the touring cars are a lot of fun. So the touring cars are an improvement for me, but I've always loved Suzuka. This is one of my favorite circuits. So touring cars on Suzuka, mega fun in my opinion. My experience with Forza Motorsport's online multiplayer has mostly been pretty positive. I haven't experienced a lot of things that had ruined it for me in the past with Forza Motorsport's online. The races feel nice and clean and competitive. But that's my experience. I know there are still some pretty bad races online. But I haven't personally experienced any problems with dirty drivers and the shameful rammers in my online races quite yet. And that being the case, I'm super glad, because this game overall is just, I think it's kind of where the game needed to be a while ago in terms of the Forza Motorsport games, especially with the physics and handling stuff. I know I keep talking about that, but I think that is a super strong point for this game. It's hard for me to say anything negative about my experience so far with Forza Motorsport. It does have its fair share of bugs. I experienced crashing on one occasion that I can recall, and the other thing that happens for me sometimes is in the multiplayer menus, I sometimes will randomly get kicked from a race. Not that often, not often enough that I don't feel like playing the game anymore. I would call it still a slight inconvenience, but I haven't experienced anything yet to the point where I feel like I can't even play the game. And I have faith that a lot of the problems that Forza has right now are going to be fixed. I mean, they wouldn't put in all the work to release a game that feels like it's got massively great potential just to leave it just that potential. I think this game is going to go a long way, and I really hope they do continue to work on this game. It doesn't have many problems right now that I can think of, but what it does have, I know, can turn a lot of people away, but I am hoping, and I do have faith, that they're going to fix a lot of these problems. So me not doing particularly well in this race has nothing to do with the game itself. It all comes down to me and my lack of online racing experience. But even that being the case, I still had a really good and really positive experience in this race, and that just comes down to Turn 10 has overall made a really good game this time around. They took a really big step in the direction they needed to be. But anyway, enough of that stuff. Let's get on to the race. I'll give a little bit of context to the race before we watch the actual race itself. Just like I had mentioned earlier, this is one of my favorite tracks, so when I seen it in one of the hoppers, I immediately jumped in the lobby, and thankfully I had noticed it early when the lobby had first opened. So when this hopper first opened, there was still like 30 minutes of practice. And I hadn't done a race on this track before, so I used pretty well all 30 minutes. Majority of practice, of course, and then I had to do my qualifying laps. But I got like a good 20 minutes or so of practice in on the track. I know this track well, but I haven't raced on it much yet in Forza. Well, rather this Forza Motorsport. So I spent about 20 minutes plus learning how the car handles on this track and finding all my braking references. Just the run-of-the-mill stuff that you do when you're practicing before a race. But the other, and I think most significant thing that I had done during practice was I had a look at the race distance, which was 7 laps. So I wanted to determine what type of race I was going to run, if I wanted to try to do a no-stop race on the hard tires, or maybe try to run a 2-stop race on the mediums. And I had opted to try the no-stop race, the 0-stop on the hard tires. So what I had done was I threw in about 7 or 8 laps worth of fuel, and then I went out to do the 7 laps on the hard tire just to see if they can do the 7 laps. And around the 5th or 6th lap, the tires had completely fallen off. I had no more grip. I had 0 pace. So from that experience, I had learned that the hard tires were not going to do the distance. So regardless of what anybody thought, I knew that this was going to be a pit stop race. So I made the decision, even though I didn't really get to test the mediums, I was pretty confident based on what I had experienced already that the mediums were going to go, they could do half the distance each, so I can do medium for the race, and that's what I decided I was going to do. So it felt like it was a great use of the practice session for me. I'd learned a lot. Not only did I get familiar with this car on this track, I'd figured out what my strategy needed to be, and I felt like it was a solid strategy, because I was pretty sure that a lot of people, if they weren't going to be on the mediums, they were going to try to run the hards to the end. And I knew from my 5 to 6 lap practice with the tires that they weren't going to make the distance. So after qualifying, I managed to qualify 3rd for this race, which I felt like was really strong, because before this race, for quite a handful of races, I was qualifying about midfield out of about 20 drivers per lobby. So in a handful of races before this one, I was pretty mediocre, average driver halfway down the field. So to qualify 3rd, I was feeling really good. I felt like I had a pretty strong pace, and learning the knowledge that I did from my practice, I felt like snagging 1st or 2nd place was not outside of the realm of possibilities for me. It didn't seem like anybody else had done a practice similar to me where they tried to run all 7 laps on one tire, so I felt like that was going to be a strong asset for me, was knowing that little bit of knowledge that even if you run the hards, you're not going to make it. You still had to run a pit stop. So I felt like that was kind of my ace in the hole that was going to win this race for me. And so starting from 3rd place, I was feeling pretty good about this race. I was still maybe a little bit nervous coming into the race, but I knew I had some pretty good pace, and running that practice program of that 7 laps on the hard tire made me pretty confident. And here you can see me looking through all the tires. Everybody that's on medium I know is going to run a 1-stop race. The softs, you would have to go soft hard for this race. I didn't have any. The mediums made the most sense to me, so I seen only that one guy on the hard. I knew he was he was gonna have to make a stop. It seemed like he was thinking the hards were gonna make it to the end. He may have even joined late, so he may not have even had time to try the hards for the race distance during the practice. So having a look at the grid and everybody's tires and fuel loads. Oh, another thing that I did was I had fueled the car for only 4 laps, so that was going to be my pit lap, was lap 4. So I was even pretty light on fuel. So I felt like I had a really solid strategy. I felt like I had worked out the best strategy possible for this race. It didn't seem like anybody else put in the effort that I did to come up with a good strategy, which made me feel like I had a pretty good advantage coming into this race. So even though I was I guess I was a bit nervous. I was kind of thinking that it was going to be tough for the beginning when we're all bunched up together. I knew losing positions off the start was going to be a possibility, which did happen. But I wasn't worried at all. I felt like even though somebody had gotten past me, or he's about to get past me. Even though, actually 2 cars got in front of me. So even though they got in front of me, I was still feeling pretty good that I was gonna finish on the podium and even possibly first or second. So I was a little weak coming off the line, and then into turn 1 on the exit, I also had a pretty weak line, which cost me 2 positions. I had a feeling that might happen because this is my first race in the touring cars. Here I thought I was going to get back at him. He took this corner quite wide, and I was able to get up the inside, but his acceleration was just better. I couldn't get by him right there. Vinna Diaster, he managed to keep 4th position, but I'm still feeling pretty good behind this pack of cars, so I know I can keep up with them. All I had to do was keep my race clean, and so I was feeling pretty good, feeling pretty confident by this point. I felt like these were the only positions I was going to lose. So I didn't have any more to lose. All I had was to gain, is what I had in my head by this point. The Golf straight line speed had surprised me here, and I don't know why he turned in on me. He tried to take the apex. I'm not totally sure why. I was beside him. I had the inside line, and he still tried to hit the literal apex of the corner and bumped me. I don't know why. I feel like I did him a little dirty here. I didn't leave quite that much room, but he still manages to get inside, so it's all fair, good, hard racing, and I managed to keep the inside line and stay in front. So this is where things get a little bit crazy. Vinna Diaster goes off, and while avoiding contact, I myself go off and get a penalty, which kind of made me upset. This was partly because it was my first penalty ever online, but also because I was trying to avoid contact both in front of me and beside me. So I get in my own head here, totally miss my breaking point because I'm still upset about the penalty, and just bad goes to worse very quickly here. And then getting back on the track, I didn't really do myself any favors here. I didn't come back on very aggressively. I'm trying to avoid getting yet another penalty, and just this whole pack of 6 cars, it looks like, just float past me quite easily while I come back on carefully. So I would call that about 2.5 mistakes. I pick up the penalty was the first mistake, and then second and worse, the biggest mistake I made was missing my braking point and running a long way off the track. And then what I felt like was half a mistake was coming on the track too cautiously. I feel like I didn't necessarily let the cars by, but I didn't do myself any favors coming back on the track so cautiously. I feel like I may have been able to save some positions if I had come on a little more aggressively, but I really didn't want to pick up another penalty. So I'm feeling pretty hurt by this point, but I know I've got pace, and I managed to get a pretty good clean overtake on Sabi here. That overtake felt really good. I managed to slip up the inside and outbrake him, and he hit me on the corner, kind of the similar way that Golf did earlier. He just taps me. I already had the line. I'm already on the apex, and I don't know where he was expecting to go at that particular moment when we're both taking the corner. I don't know. That happens quite a lot. I want to say it doesn't bother me, but I guess it does kind of annoy me. But I managed to get a couple of positions here. Somebody ran wide, and I was able to slip through before the straight, and then I get a really good slipstream. I was about to be overtaken, but thankfully Old Bones went defensive and blocked Mate from Hunger from passing us. Unfortunately, he himself, Old Bones, had lost 2 positions, but thankfully he did go defensive there, and I was able to move up a spot and simultaneously keep Mate from Hunger behind me. So there's a couple of things in my head at this point that make me still feel pretty good about this race. First off, I have good pace because I qualified 3rd. Secondly, I have a little bit of a weight advantage because I underfueled by half the race distance because I know I'm going to stop anyway. So I'll add fuel later on. And the third thing that I feel is going to give me a strong advantage is I know that everybody's going to have to stop. I felt like there was a good number of people in this lobby that thought that they might make it to the end on the mediums or hard, which I absolutely knew for a fact was not going to happen. But I felt like some people were committed to the strategy of running a zero stop race on the mediums or hard. So that combination of things that I knew was giving me confidence that I was going to make it back. And Lacro Batty ran wide, and I managed to pick up another position, so I'm already back up into 10th. But I do have my 0.8 penalty and a pit stop to make, so I'm not totally sure where I'm going to get to by this point, but I'm confident I'm going to make a strong top 5 finish is what I'm thinking right now. All I've got to do is keep my race clean from here on, and I think I'm going to finish well. And with the cars in front of me looking like they're about to have a battle, I'm sensing an opportunity for another position in the next couple of corners. I'm not getting any slipstream here from anybody, unfortunately. Maybe I am, but I think I'm too far back. And thankfully, Mate from Hunger this time, I don't know if he just had a better exit or what, but it felt like he didn't have the same speed there that he did on the previous lap when he was about to overtake me and then got blocked. And these guys are battling pretty hard, so it feels like I'm about to get a couple more positions. I didn't realize, so here, I was supposed to pit on the next lap, but I decided to change my strategy mid-race. So now I'm thinking, since I've fallen back and lost a few positions, and I'm in a lot of traffic right now, and I know I've got better pace than them because I qualified ahead of all these cars. So what I'm thinking is I need some clear track. So I decided to pit early and come out on what was supposed to be an empty track. Unfortunately, there's another car here. So I was supposed to go fuel halfway, then go medium, but instead what I do is I pit early and go on the hard so I can run on open track. So instead of overtaking everybody physically on the track, which is going to slow me down, I decided to pit early and run on free track, and with my faster lap times I should be in front of everybody by the time they make their pit stops. Even if they think they're not going to, even before the race had started, I know everybody has to pit because even the hards would make it to the end in 7 laps in this particular race. So even though I felt like I had the perfect strategy before, I felt like well, of course I did ruin that a little bit by making all the mistakes that I had made, but I felt like I had adapted very strongly here and made what I felt like this was a great decision. Unfortunately, I do get stuck behind this guy, and well, strategy 1 ruined immediately as soon as the race started, and strategy 2 also ruined. What happened was, I forget the car that was in front of me. He braked way earlier than I was expecting for that hairpin. And so that threw me off, and I had to kind of jerk to the left to the inside of the corner, and well, it just went all sorts of wrong when that happened. So he braked. I should have anticipated that. He might have been on the soft tire. So I don't. He may have been braking early because he knew I was gonna dive up the inside. I wasn't actually planning on it. I was just gonna take him on one of the straights here. So he may have braked early thinking I was gonna dive up the inside, but what I think is more likely, and I should have anticipated right there, is that his tires are probably pretty worn, especially if he's on the softs. I think there was people on the softs, but I should have anticipated that was a possibility that he was on the softs and his tires are going to be garbage. I at least get another position here, but him braking that early took me totally by surprise, and if I was thinking I could have avoided, I should have anticipated that his tires were going to be worn and he was going to need to brake earlier and take that corner much slower. He pushes me off the track during the front straight, and then he's not giving me a lot of room. I don't know. It didn't feel like he was trying to be a dirty driver, but he didn't feel like he knew what he was doing. I wasn't too impressed with him not giving me any space, but it was still pretty hard fare racing. I don't think it was dirty. I just wasn't impressed, which seems to be a pretty common thing in Forza Motorsport Online this time around, where it doesn't feel like people are necessarily trying to intentionally ram you off the course or punt you straight into a barrier. It just feels more like, for whatever reason, they're not leaving space that you're entitled to. Whether that's by purpose or accident, I'm not sure, but at least they're not ramming you off the track. Rod's 474 here, great defensive move, but even better overtake. I didn't expect him to go defensive there. I look back in that moment, and I just look back in a moment of respect for him, because that was, it took me by surprise, but I thought that was a great attempt at a defend to go inside and take the defensive line on the inside. I did not expect that, but I was able to pull off the old switcheroony on him, which felt pretty amazing, I have to say. Good clean racing, good clean defense, and a good clean overtake. That's not something that I experience much, especially in Forza games. In the F1 games, stuff like that I would say is commonplace, but in a Forza game, that just made me feel really good that Forza's heading in the right direction in a strong way. But anyway, I'm up into 15th place, which seems bad, but I know people are still going to pit in front. Catch up to our old pal, Old Bones, who helped save us on the straight a few laps ago, and he's pitting for tires. He was going pretty slow. It seemed like he was trying to make his tires last. He might have been somebody that went on the mediums, thinking, because a lot of the races right now online, the mediums will do the race distance, so he may have just assumed the mediums were fine. But he was really stretching them out. I was going to pit on lap 4, where I was sure the mediums were going to be done, and this was at the end of lap 5, so he looked like he was absolutely struggling there and had to dive into the pits, which I knew was going to happen with maybe at least half of the drivers in this lobby. And that was something that made me feel really good about my strategy, was exactly what Old Bones had just done. He'd run too long on his tires. I knew that was going to be something that happened. So I knew I had a good strategy to start with. And then my second strategy, which I'd come up with in the moment on the fly to pit early and go on the hards instead of the mediums, I felt like was going to be an excellent recovery strategy. I felt like that was going to get me back into the top 5. Unfortunately, on this very hairpin, I had made a mistake and went off yet again. But I still think this is a really good example of how a good strategy can be a powerful tool for you in your race. And it's also an example of what's possible in Forza Motorsport Online racing now. This was never something that was an experience before in previous motorsport games. There was no online race where strategy was a factor unless you made a custom race. The online hoppers just didn't have this, and I think that was another factor for me that made me not want to participate in online racing in Forza Motorsport. There was no strategy to it. That's, for me, something that makes racing so great, is when you can come up with a good strategy, and instead of straight up outpacing somebody, you overcome them by coming up with a great strategy, which I felt like I had done in this race. And I think being able to recover some of these positions and watching people struggle, just like Max Foxboy there, I did have a little sense of satisfaction watching people around me struggle, like I knew they would, just exactly like I knew they would. I was still getting a pretty good sense of satisfaction knowing that I had made all the right decisions. Poor skill, I guess, and lack of experience meant that I wasn't able to necessarily pull it off. And I think it was also just a little bit of bad luck. I wouldn't necessarily say that it was a total skill issue, but I was able to come up with a great strategy, and I think if not everything, a good amount of everything that I had anticipated happened in this race. And even though I'm not going to finish in a strong position, that still made me feel pretty good. It felt good to know that strategy was going to play a big part in Forza Motorsport Online. And it feels even better when you know you put in the work and time and effort and can come up with a good strategy yourself. But after everything that had happened in this race, I have to say I don't think finishing in 11th is really a bad thing at all things considered, because I was down in 20th or 21st place and managed to, not just through pace alone but through strategy, I was able to fight my way back up into 11th place. I still think I would have finished strong in the top 5 if I hadn't have made that third mistake on the hairpin, where somebody braking early had taken me completely by surprise, and I just lose control of the car trying to get on the inside line, and it wasn't even the braking that messed me up on the hairpin. I just, by total surprise, I jerked the car over and spun out off of the track. But I think I still made all the right decisions, which feels great. And even though the race itself for me wasn't that great, the experience felt pretty amazing. To know that strategy is going to play a pretty big role in online multiplayer once in a while. Maybe not every race. I know some races are still run with 0 stops, but this is, I think, a pretty good example of the potential that Forza Motorsport has right now. I would love to see a Forza Motorsport where online requires more thinking and a lot more strategy than it does right now, and I just feel like this race is a great example of that. Not a great finish, 11th place, but considering everything that happened, I feel like I made all the right decisions and came out with the best result possible when considering the mistakes I'd made. So overall, it felt like a pretty good race. I know it's not a strong finishing position, but I felt like my racing itself was pretty strong, managing to come back from 20th place up to 11th. But anyway, I'm Evil Punk. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.